It is a huge honor for me to be podcast interviewing Steve Biorn, which reminds me when I was little, before you were born, one of the Wimbledon champions was Bjorn Borg. They used to call him the Iceberg Borg. He was so fun to watch. Do you remember them calling him the Iceberg?
No, I don't.
Yeah, they called me Iceberg because he was playing John McEnroe, who would just like emotionally lose it, and fight with the judges and all this stuff. And then here's this Bjorn Borg, and he never said a thing. He never made a noise. He never grunted. They call him the Iceberg, and he was just brilliant to watch. So your bio, you did the U.S. Army for 2 years after high school, graduated with high distinction from the University of Minnesota in biochemistry, graduated from University of Minnesota School of Dentistry in 2013. DSO work from June 2013 to October 2015. Private practice associate with Biorn October 2015. Pre-fellow AGD averaging over 100 hours of CE a year. And I get so many requests. By the way, if you're listening to this, you can email me, howard@dentaltown.com. I get a lot of requests saying, you just do old guys. Do some young kids out of school. Lots of kids watch this and listen to the show in dental school, juniors and seniors. And so it's just fantastic to have a young dentist out there, only 31 years old. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful Saturday morning.
It's a beautiful Saturday morning on the 4th of July weekend, and I'm not going to tell you what time I went to bed last night. I just want you to know that I'm up for the show, and I have a pulse. That's all I'm going to say. I'm a big fan of your 667 posts on Dental Town. So talk to the kids in school. What's it like graduating? I always felt like they were so obsessed with trying to get all the requirements done, and they finally do what they've been aiming at forever, and they graduate and get their diploma, and then the next morning they wake up and go, uh-oh, now what?
Right, and I definitely agree with that. You've been striving, working hard, studying, you got boards, all that good stuff. Every waking moment is kind of taken up by something, and then all of a sudden you start working, and especially as an associate, there's no real business to run. You kind of show up, do the dentistry, go home. So filling that extra time does become kind of a challenge.
So what do you recommend? You're talking to someone and it's July 2nd. They just graduated from dental school last month, and they're sitting there thinking, okay, there's so many different paths to take. Talk to these kids. What would you tell them?
Yeah, there's so many different paths to take, and everybody's going to take a different path, and whatever one you take is probably the right one for you. So for me, I looked into GPRs. I looked into doing the military like I had done after high school. I was married, had one kid already in high school or in dental school, so it wasn't really a good issue or a good option for me to do the military. So I was kind of just looking for something, get my feet wet, do some dentistry, make some money, pay back some student loans, and kind of go that route.
Now, did you get married in dental school or afterwards?
Right before dental school, actually.
Oh, you got married before dental school. So you went through dental school as a married man. I remember the class, there was about, I don't know what percent, but there were a few that were married back then.
There was only a couple probably married before dental school. Seems like lots got married during dental school. Lots had kids, I'd say senior year of dental school. And
you're still married to her?
Life happens fast. We're still married. Yep. We just celebrated 8 years actually.
Was that her
June.
that just I just saw out of the corner of my eye taking a picture?
That was her. Yep.
So how many people got married in dental school and then got divorced in dental school? Because in our class, it was a very, very high divorce rate for anybody who got married in school.
There were a couple, you're right. I don't know what the percentage was, but there was definitely a couple that got married and they were divorced a year later, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be really, really hard to be married while you're going to dental school, med school, law school. It's just an all-consuming thing. You must have a very balanced wife. What's that?
Understanding wife, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of maturity to sit there and say, I know, it'd be selfish to tell my husband, you come home, let's spend the whole evening together, but if he's got a test tomorrow in biochemistry, you just got to keep taking sacrifices for the team.
Yeah, and dental school is definitely a grueling process. It's probably 60, 70 hours a week, I would say, by the time you do classwork, studying, waxing teeth after hours and all that good stuff. It definitely consumes everything you have. So
I was lucky. I never had to wax teeth because my buddy Craig Steichen, a dentist in Albuquerque, was the best waxer in the world, and he could wax my whatever after school in 5 minutes instead of me sitting there until 3 in the morning getting a D on it. He'd do it in 5 minutes and get an A. And so how did you so what was it like going in the U.S. Army 2 years after high school? What did you do there?
So yeah, that's a whole other story, I'd say. But during high school, not a very good student. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Military seemed like a decent option, so I did 2 years with them. Deployed overseas. Found out that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, and came back a very focused student. And
Where were you deployed?
Baghdad.
Wow, and this must be extra meaningful for you on being on Fourth of July weekend. What's it feel like? What's a Fourth of July feel like after you served the country for 2 years and went to Baghdad?
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. Tears to your eyes, kind of amazing. So.
Wow. Well, thanks for doing that, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then you picked whenever I see someone with a college degree and it's in communications, I just chuckle. Communications psychology. That's like, what's the easiest degree I can get? But when I see people that get a degree in physics or chemistry or biochemistry, I just think, wow, that is a hell of a student. What made you pick biochemistry?
Dumb luck, I guess. I don't know.
Dumb luck?
Yeah. I had some interest there, and at the U of M, it's like you get so into that degree before you actually take any biochem classes that by the time I started taking them, it was almost too late to shift gears. That's one of the reasons I ended up doing dentistry, because I figured I didn't want to do biochemistry, but I'm so far into the undergrad degree, I almost have to find something else to do. So that's the way it shook out.
So was there a dentist in your family? Was mom, dad a dentist, aunt, uncle?
Yeah, my dad's a dentist, or was a dentist. He's retired now.
Yeah. Was that pretty common in your dental school class? It seems like no matter what dental school you go to, from here to Kathmandu, about 30% a third of the kids have a dentist in their family tree.
Very common. I'd say in my class, probably a dozen or so of us had general dentists as either mom or dad, or mom and dad. And then in my class specifically, there's probably 6 or 7 that were sons of oral surgeons, a couple orthodontists, I think one periodontist. So, yeah, I mean, our class was 98 people, and I bet 20 or more were from dentist families.
And it's actually in economics, that's extremely common for all occupations. I mean, if you were born and your dad was a goat herder in Tanzania, I mean, you knew goats, and I saw that in Kansas. If your dad was in small grains, you're very likely to be a wheat farmer. If he was a dairy farmer versus cattle, I mean, it's very it's on the job training. And
yeah, and it's one of those things. I looked into medicine, and it was I already had my Army time in. By the time I finish med school, residency, fellowship, by the time you start even paying back those student loans, I'm going to be almost 40 years old. I looked into pharmacy. Pharmacy seemed really boring to me. So dentistry kind of had that mix where it's not as long of a commitment as medicine, maybe. It still offers a great lifestyle, and you kind of get the best of both worlds, I guess.
Well, here's one thing I noticed about all the kids who's if your mom stayed home and made cookies and your dad worked on an assembly line, there was no business discussion around the family table. But if your dad owned a restaurant or your dad was a dentist, you got so much on-the-job training just by living in the same house with your dad. And I always have noticed those kids whose dad owned a business had a huge advantage after school. But if their dad owned a dental office, they even had a bigger advantage because they've already lived the business. Do you think growing up in your father's household is one of the reasons that you were only an employee for 2 years before you bought your own practice? You think that's a huge advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. I haven't bought in yet, but the buy-in is kind of we're working out some details with that. But I mean, I think that definitely is part of it. I think if he wasn't there, kind of, not pushing me along, but there for advice, I guess, it probably wouldn't have happened as quick as it did, I would think.
Yeah, I just think I just see so much intuitive evidence that if the man or the wife, if they don't have a family background, like if you marry a woman and her mom was and dad were own their own farm, they know business. They know so many principles of business. But when mom and dad are just employees, they seem to have a lot less business intuition. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I mean, it absolutely helps out. And I think once you're in for a little bit, especially working for a DSO, you kind of get that experience. You, as far as the wet glove dentistry, kind of get the dentistry down the flow of things and things like that. That you kind of run out of things that you're learning eventually. And the last 6 months, maybe even the last year that I was there, I just felt like every day or every week was pretty much the same thing. Go in, do some crowns, do some fillings, take out a tooth, wake up the next day, kind of do the same thing. And so, I always try to learn, keep improving, keep growing, and I felt like I'd kind of reached my max there. So,
Okay, you mentioned DSO. Explain to these kids in dental school what a DSO is and why and all
yeah,
that.
so it's a dental service organization. So the one that I worked with specifically owned about 400 or so offices. Um,
Which one was that? I would guess Pacific
Ameri-
Dental.
American Dental Partners.
Oh, American Dental Partners. And what city did you work in?
I worked in Maple Grove and Albertville, which are kind of suburbs of Minneapolis.
Yeah, my sister is in a cloistered Carmelite monastery in Lake Elmo. So I've been to. So
All
ever
right.
did you know that?
I knew that she was in Monster. I didn't realize it was Lake Elmo, though.
Yeah, and it's great because to make it a business expense, you got to spend 4 hours and 1 minute doing business to make a business write-off. So the two big low-hanging fruit in Minneapolis, St. Paul is Patterson Dental Company and 3M. So I'd rather either go sit it with Pete Frechette, the founder of Patterson, and talk shop with him for 4 hours and 1 minute, or I'd go over to 3M and harass the biochemist. And that's why I have so much respect for you in biochemistry. And that's one thing. I got to tell you one story about visiting 3M that many times. Um, they probably don't want me to say this, and but it is Dentistry Uncensored. But those the people that make those products, I mean, they're doctors in biochemistry, and they're in white lab coats, and they can take you to a grease board and just make you seem like you were born without a head in 5 minutes with all these organic equations and this and this. And then I would tell them a couple of flippant one-liners that some dentist on and a continuing education thing said about their product and everything, and you could just see them turn into a volcano, and you become to realize that these intermediates feign expertise. And in Europe, when you go to a dental meeting, you don't have all these middlemen talking about the products. The dentists feel most comfortable going to the company's owner and biochemist and talking to them one-on-one about their implants, their bonding agent, whatever. But Americans are extremely cynical, and they would say, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to you about your 3M bonding agent because you work for 3M. You're just trying to sell me something." Americans are so cynical and they don't trust. So they'll go talk to an intermediate, but that intermediate guy doesn't have a PhD in organic chemistry, and he didn't spend 5 years on a bonding agent. He doesn't know crap about this, but everybody in the audience thinks he's the master of this product, and they're not. And I always wonder why the dentist won't trust talking to a dental manufacturer because they're selling something, whereas the dentist, they're selling something. I mean, if you tell me, I need a filling or a crown, I have to trust that if minimally invasive dentistry said I only need a filling, you do the right thing and do a filling. You wouldn't stick my tooth in a pencil sharpener just because you wanted to upgrade it from a $250 filling to a $1,000 crown. And I just don't understand why dentists have so low trust for dental manufacturers, but they expect everybody to trust them. In fact, on OrthoTown, I own OrthoTown too, they won't even let a dental manufacturer join the website. So if all the orthodontists on OrthoTown are all saying, "Man, Steve's bonding agent's red, and it'd be so great if it was blue," the dental manufacturer making it can't even see that data. I mean, they can't even be connected with the people using their end product, and who we all should be focused on is the patient. And so the orthodontists and the orthodontic manufacturers, the end goal should be serving the patient. And so, yeah. But anyway, sorry for that rant.
Yeah,
So,
Orthotown is like a CIA underground layer that no one knows about, really. I think so.
Well, there's nine specialties of dentistry in America. France only has three. They have oral surgeons, endodontists, and oral pathologists. But America's come up with nine, which is kind of interesting because dentistry is only 5% of the healthcare budget. The other 95%, the physicians, they only came up with 58 specialties. So if every 5% had nine, what's nine times 20? Come on, you're a biochemistry. 180, so and they only have 58. So obviously we have a hell of a lot of specialties. But they're the only one of the nine specialties that we want our own site and for orthodontists only. So I did it. But I can't even go on that site and I own it. How's that? So when you're getting an associate practice, I always tell kids, get a job where there's something that person has that you want to learn. Maybe it's leadership. Maybe you respect the fact that they have low staff turnover. Or maybe it's business. So would you say working for American Dental Partners, where they have the free enterprise business skills to be able to run 500 offices, when most dentists have a very hard problem just running one? Do you think you learned a lot of practice management working at a big corporate dental DSO?
Absolutely, and I think when companies have the large financial obligations like they do, things like HIPAA and infection control, they're taught like to the T exactly how it should be done. Whereas I feel like some private practices, there's kind of a gray zone there, or this is how they learned in dental school 30 years ago, and they haven't really kept up with the times. But the nice part about working for a DSO is everything follows the letter of the law. There's no gray zone. It's always, the attorneys or somebody's looked into it, and they have somebody in charge of HIPAA. They have somebody in charge of infection control, looking at different products, making sure everything's from sterilization monitoring and how rooms are wiped down, and the eyewear you wear and the gloves you wear, and everything is just followed to a T. That I think, as far as that stuff goes, where dental school you learn some of that, but I feel like that's what really one of the big takeaways that I took away from working for American Dental Partners was that.
Yeah, I laugh on the Dental Town board sometimes when there's about, I think there's like 350 corporate dental offices that have more than 50 offices. And every once in a while, one of them will get in trouble with the law and something like that, HIPAA or this or that, and it'll make the newspaper. And people in Dental Town will say, oh, look at them dropping the ball. And I'm just sitting there thinking, every one of you posting on this thread, if that HIPAA person came into your office, I bet that corporate would have got the highest grade. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those things, too, where, if somebody does show up, if something happens, somebody like Board of Dentistry, whoever shows up to one of the offices, and that office learns something, they share it with all the other offices so that we're all kind of on the same page. So I would say that was one of the big benefits of working for them is you're not allowed to go to the gray zone because everything is so spelt out for you exactly how they want it done.
And every attorney general or everybody at HIPAA or whatever, they want to make an example of the 400-pound gorilla. They want to go get Heartland or Pacific or Aspen or American Dental. No one wants to go just get that small-town guy in Parsons, Kansas that has 3 operatories. That's just not ego gratification. So they're a very high target. So they do dot the I's, cross the T's. But I want to ask you, you're a young perspective. You're 22 years younger than me. Your dad was a dentist. You worked for a company that had 500 offices. What do you think's going to serve? Where do you think DSOs versus private practice are going? When you're my age and you got a granddaughter named Taylor Marie, how big do you think corporate will be? Do you think it's going to take a quarter, half, 3/4, or do you think they'll take the whole thing like
I think eventually they're going to take quite a bit more. I think the way that the trend seems to be going is like the private practice solo practitioner, that's kind of going by the wayside with how expensive new technology has gotten, and watching overheads and being able to share overheads. I think you got a couple options, either a DSO type of a format where one dentist owns 500 offices and you work for them as an associate, or you work in a larger group office where it's 2 to maybe 4 dentists, something like that.
And that's another funny thing I read on the message boards where these guys that just demand that you buy all the new expensive technology don't realize that's one of the largest macroeconomic variables feeding group practice. I mean, if you want to know why physicians all consolidated, it was because they had to share an MRI machine. They had to share all this expensive machinery, and the technology got so expensive you couldn't just be solo anymore. It just forced group. And I keep telling dentists that I see so many successful dentists that take a $18 impression to make a crown. You don't have to have a $30,000 oral scanner. There's nothing wrong with sending a $13 impression to a lab man and having him delivered 2 weeks later. You don't have to have a $150,000 machine. I don't know why anybody buy a CBCT, because just like your iPhone, in 5 years you're going to want the newest model. Who in their right mind right now would want to be using a 20-year-old cell phone? But they want to get committed to a $100,000 X-ray machine. And when I just say you need access, but that expensive technology is forcing group, and it's all unnecessary. There's just so many tens of thousands of successful dental offices that just do regular family dentistry the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is one of the biggest pitfalls that people get into is buying the CEREC, the cone beam, and all that.
Are you going to do that?
Probably not. No, I'm a little more sensible than that. I'm too cheap, Howard.
You're too cheap. So you're in the same area as Patterson Dental. You're in Maple Grove, Minnesota. How far is that from Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Maple Grove's probably about 20 minutes to downtown Minneapolis.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Lake Elmo, where my sister's in the nunnery?
I have.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful area. I got to tell you a story. Maybe you'll believe this. I don't know if you'll believe this or not, but one day I left Phoenix, and leaving my house in Phoenix in the winter to her nunnery, I dropped 100 degrees in temperature. I mean, you just can't make that stuff up. I mean, it can get brutally cold up there, can it?
It can, yeah. Well, it can get brutally hot in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, it does, and it's the same behavior. When I was in Kansas and it's really cold outside, you stayed inside, and that was in the winter. In the summer, last week it hit 118, and about 115 people die of heat exhaustion every summer. And it's always people your age. It's never old, fat, bald people, because we know we'll die out there, but the young kids will go out there and they'll hike these mountains, or they'll go mountain bike riding at 120 degrees. There was a lady, I couldn't believe it. She was a personal trainer. She was 28. She was an Ironman, and she was in a mountain biking group, and there were 2 physicians in the group, and she got dizzy and fell off her bike, and with 2 doctors there giving her water and everything, she still died.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's brutal. I think the evidence is overwhelming that I will never die from overexercising. I'm pretty sure that I can.
There, I think I'm in the same boat. I think I'll take it easy.
But it looks Patterson was in the news all last week. It looks like they've cut back on some of their reps. What did they lay off? Like 200 reps, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it sounded like they cut back on some of their sales reps in the Midwest. To be honest, we use Patterson at our office, and I think I've seen the rep maybe once or twice. Maybe called her on the phone once. So I don't think it's going to be a huge deal, and I can't imagine that it affects their business long term. I wouldn't think, but.
Yeah, and I also think that dentists spend way too much time thinking about, obsessing about supplies and everything. It's 4 to 6% of your business. I mean, labor is 25%. I wish everybody trying to save a nickel on gauze would be able to tell me all their payroll statistics, because payrolls. When you're in a service, labor is going to make you or break you. And keep your eye on labor, and you're not going to solve all your problems by putting a lockbox over the thermostat and getting a temperature control system to save electricity. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now pharmacy was the opposite. When I was a kid, 80%, their supply bill for the pills was 80%. So it was a totally natural economic phenomena to sit there and say, if we're all spending 80% on pills, and those companies are billion-dollar pharmaceuticals, we should all join into one huge monster purchasing organization to be able to muscle back, Merck, Pfizer, all that kind of stuff. So what technology are you interested in?
Well, at our office, we have electronic dental records, we have digital x-rays. For American Dental Partners, we actually did have, it was a CEREC Connect So it didn't have a milling unit, but it would be an acquisition for digital impressioning. But since I left there, now I'm in private practice. We do use the regular VPS impressioning, like what you were talking about. So that was a little bit of a change going back. It had been a while since I'd used it, but just kind of like riding a bike. It's what we used in dental school. Not a huge deal. But I think digital impressioning is kind of the wave of the future, but like you said, it doesn't make any sense to spend 30, 50 grand on something that's going to be outdated in a couple of years. And I think they're getting better. They're powder free now, but I think that there's this. It's still a milled Emax crown just doesn't seem as good to me, anyways, as a pressed Emax crown from a conventional impression.
And
Seems like I'm getting better fit now than I was previously.
And I see these lab men who have made 5 to 50 crowns a day for a couple of decades, and I don't care what anybody says, their work blows away any dentist and dental assistant chairside milling this stuff out by themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with you completely. This is Dentistry Uncensored too, so.
Yeah, and I just think it's everybody that I've ever talked to one-on-one will tell me that. How can your dental assistant who's milled out 50 crowns in her life compete with a lab tech who's milled out 50,000?
Yeah, and I think the technology has gotten better, but I still think we're probably not quite there.
Yeah. So you're a huge fan of continuing education. You're pre-fellow AGD. Talk about one of the biggest questions. We have a new grad issue every year for the kids in dental school, for the newly graduates, and they come out of school and there's so much to learn. They're being told they should learn Invisalign, they should learn CAD/CAM, they should place implants, they should learn sleep apnea. There's just so much. What CE are you taking and why?
Oh, I take a pretty wide variety, but more your bread and butter type stuff, endo, oral surgery, that kind of stuff. I haven't really gotten into the sleep apnea. I've looked into it briefly. You have to build medical insurance, it sounds like. I don't know how big of a market it would actually be. I know our office has received a prescription from a physician saying that they should get an oral appliance to help treat their sleep apnea. But specifically in the prescription, it wanted you to be certified from the Academy of Sleep Apnea. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it, but it was something like that where they wanted you to have, this certification to actually treat their patient. So I think, sleep apnea, there could be some liability there that I guess I just wasn't willing to delve into necessarily right now. And actually working for the DSO, they didn't allow us to do any ortho, placing implants, apicos, things like that. So they had their own specialists that they preferred that we referred out to. So I guess in the first 2 years of practicing, 2.5 years of practicing, that wasn't really even an option for me. So I didn't bother taking that CE if I couldn't actually use it. So now I'm in private practice. There's definitely a place for it. I think some, basic ortho, just kind of more trying to stay out of trouble. If you can be busy doing fillings and crowns and easy extractions, there's no need to necessarily, go crazy and be doing sinus lifts and whatever else. I guess that's just the way that I see it. So, just take some CE, take some good CE. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of stuff that's basically an hour-long or a weekend-long commercial trying to sell you something. Here in Minnesota, seems like the AGD is a pretty good organization. They do a protocol study after you do a weekend course with them so if it's like an oral surgery, for example, they'll give you a couple different tasks to do, basically. So over the next 6 months, you try to get a couple cases that you can present. And so for our oral surgery one, for example, it was, do like a surgical extraction where you had to, get out the surgical handpiece, you had to suture, maybe do like a bone graft, maybe like a soft tissue impacted wisdom tooth or something like that. So it's really nice to have a group to go to present stuff, especially as the young guy. A lot of these guys are going for their mastership or their lifelong learning. So they've been doing this for years and years, taking high quality CE. And they present these cases. It's just unreal how good these guys are. So I guess I would say just kind of take it slow. Don't do anything that's going to get you into big trouble at least the first year or first couple years out. And surround yourself with people that are smarter than you is a great way to learn. You show them your stuff. I know for the oral surgery one, for example, I had a sinus perforation on number 2 that I took out, and this is how I handled the complications essentially. And those guys just got on me about, well, this is the way you should have taken it out maybe to avoid that, or, this is what I do. And so when you share and you share your struggles or the things that you had a hard time with, I feel like you actually learn more maybe than showing, this is this root canal on number 3 and it looks absolutely perfect. Well, I didn't really learn anything from that. It's the ones that you mess up and you share either with a group like that or, you post on Dental Town. Don't just be a lurker on Dental Town, actually post things. And you can actually learn from each other.
I think that, watching dentists come out of school for 30 years, one of the absolute biggest predictors of their success is going to be how much CE they take. And everyone I know who took 100 hours a year plus, they just went right to the top. It's just so important. That's one of the reasons I'm so committed to this show. How many have we done, Ryan? 460. And the reason I'm doing that is because, once a month they might, after work, be tired and have to drive across town to hear a study club. And it's like I can deliver them that study club every day on their hour commute to work because you're a summation of the 5 people you hang around the most with. And what I got the most out of the AGD was Eagles Fly with Eagles, Turkeys Fly with Turkeys. I signed up for the AGD in 1987, and I look back at that decision, and it was meeting those people like you who were going for their fellowship, who were going for their mastership, who had that intense natural curiosity, always wanted to better themselves, always reaching for it. And that whole group of people that got their fellowship, they just rode to the top. In fact, the AGD's even done studies back in the day showing how much more net income an FAGD does and an MAGD does over somebody who doesn't take CE. So I applaud your natural curiosity, even though at this point I think you're just born with it. I don't think it's something learned. I think you're just born naturally curious, or you're just born not curious.
Yeah, and you got to do it. You got to, dental school is a good base, but you got to learn something every day. And there's so much to learn in this profession, and there's so much to grow. And like you said, you can do sleep apnea if you want. You can place implants if you want. You do ortho if you want. But if you're going to do it, do it to the best that you can. Maybe don't do, a weekend course on implants. Maybe do, hundreds and hundreds of hours of implant placement CE before you start placing it. Or, start out with something easy and then eventually ramp it up, that kind of thing.
And the other predictor of the 100-hour plus CE a year is the comprehensive exam diagnostic skills. You see the people who don't do the CE, they didn't have the natural curiosity, they just have an occupation, and they do one-tooth dentistry, and a lot of times are overwhelmed. But as you learn more and more tools in the toolbox, when you sit down and do that exam and look at that mouth, you just see so many more things, and you start evolving from one-tooth dentistry to quadrant dentistry to right-side dentistry to full mouth comprehensive treatment planning. So, it's just but I want to say one thing. You said endo and oral surgery. I see so many young kids struggling because they get out of school and they just life is an attitude, and your attitude determines your self-fulfilling prophecy. And they walk out of dental school and they say, I don't like blood. I'm not going to pull teeth. And yet the oral surgeons have a 40% overhead. And then I look in their practice, they're just doing cleanings, exams, x-rays, and fillings. And that's all 90% plus overhead stuff. And they won't, the crown is a great margin thing. That's about 50% overhead. But oral surgery is about 40% overhead. Endo is about 35% overhead. What would you say to a kid who comes out of school who just says, I don't like blood. I don't want to pull. I don't want to do extractions. I don't want to do root canals. They sure as hell ain't placing an implant. And they just divorce everything that is margin, everything that has a return on equity.
I think you start putting yourself into a box like that, especially, you stop taking out teeth, stop doing root canals right out of dental school. I think it's going to be a lot harder to get back on that horse than if you're like, you don't really like it, but, if you're good at it and it's a good service for the patient. A lot of patients don't like being referred out. They don't know, they've never met the oral surgeon. They don't know if they take their insurance. They don't know, where they park their car, how they check in, or, there's so many unknowns there that I know we'll refer some people sometimes, and we see them 6 months later, they still have that root tip in there, and it's because they don't want to go anywhere else. And then I offer to take it out. They're back, it's Monday that I offer to take it out. They're back Tuesday morning in my schedule to get it taken out. So I would tell them, you don't box yourself in, don't limit yourself to just fillings and crowns. I think, with the number of dental schools coming out there, the mid-level providers that are coming to market, especially in Minnesota, they can do fillings that if you're basically an associate that does fillings and crowns, you might price yourself out of a market depending on how things go over the next 30 years.
So I noticed Vermont just passed mid-level providers or dental health therapists. They were the fourth state. So Minnesota's one of the states?
Minnesota was the second one, yep.
Who was first, second, and third? So
I believe Alaska was number 1.
Okay.
Minnesota was 2, and I'm not sure what number 3 was. I know when I started dental school, that was the very first dental therapy class, which is the mid-level provider. And during dental school, the Dakotas, which are just west of Minnesota, both tried to pass that because they don't have a dental school in North or South Dakota. They try to do things with scholarships and whatnot to try to get people to move there to be dentists there. But I think they were looking to maybe open up the door, solve their access to care issue that they have there by accepting them. But it sounded like neither state passed, at least while I was in dental school. So
yeah, I was, to tell the truth, I was I love business. I love economics. So I love competition. I think competition is good for any industry. When I grew up, when I was 10 years old and you'd walk down the street on a Saturday, every third house, dad and their uncle and sons were in the garage trying to fix up an old Chevy, Ford. You couldn't even keep them running. Every grandpa I know had acronyms like Ford stood for something about, do you remember what Ford stood for?
Fall on road dead.
Yeah, I mean, these cars they were so crappy. And then Japan and Germany started sending cars in. And I remember they bought the first German Volkswagen, and everybody would just say the same thing. I can't believe it. Every time you turn the key, that thing just fires up. And that's all everyone would talk about. It just never broke down. And when they started this mid-level provider, I mean, Alaska had been crying for years that they had areas of Alaska the size of states like Rhode Island and Vermont with not one dentist. And they needed someone out there, and the dentists were just so against that. But everything's checks and balance, and I think what's best for any industry is competition. I also see a lot of these dentists who decide they're going to be cosmetic dentists. I want to point out something that I graduated in 87, May 11, 87, and that October was a Black Monday, and the S&P dropped 500 points. So I got a taste of the bad times, 4 months out of school. And in 2008 was the mother of all tsunamis. It was basically the Great Depression with liquidity. The Great Depression 29 was they tried to save the dollar, and that caused a third of the banks to go under and a third unemployment. But in that 2008, he printed about, I think it was $4 to $6 trillion of paper. I mean, he said we're gonna give up the dollar to try to save the banks and all that. But I noticed the cosmetic dentists in North Scottsdale, as soon as all those veneer cases were out the door, they couldn't adjust. They couldn't go back to a pulpotomy, a denture, a partial, an extraction, a root canal. They had lost all their skill set, and about 85 of them went bankrupt. And I know a lot of these people. A lot of these people were my friends, and they absolutely would tell. I mean, I had one telling me, we were at a bar having a cheeseburger, and he just told me, Howard, I can't do a root canal. I'm just looking at this 50-year-old dentist and say, how do you get out of dental school? And 30 years later, a patient walks in with a toothache, and you can't do a root canal. You can't pull the tooth. They had lost so many skill sets. And so I think you should, just like your investment portfolio should be diversified, God, I just think the best dentists are the ones that have a toolbox. They can open that toolbox and do root canals, fillings, crowns, pulpotomies, chrome steel crowns, et cetera. Keep your skill set diversified. And if you're going to be a cosmetic dentist, the most lucrative thing in cosmetic dentistry, obviously, it would be a crown or a veneer, but Invisalign. And I'm surprised at how many cosmetic dentists, they don't even do short-term ortho. They don't do Invisalign. They don't do anything like that. And that's some high-margin stuff. Are you gonna? What are your thoughts on clear aligners?
Yeah, I think clear aligners. I think that technology does great things. I'm as far as ortho goes, some long-term treatment options, things like that. I'm really waiting until I own a practice. I'm stuck in that one spot, and I kind of know my future before I start, doing treatment that's going to take 18 months to 2 years. But I think definitely it's the wave of the future. Another note on cosmetic dentists, I think when you go to sell your practice, if you've been doing a bunch of, if you do a full mouth rehab a week or something like that, it's going to be hard to find a buyer for that because, you take that dentist out, he's well known probably in the community. There's probably a lot of internal referrals and things like that, and I don't know if people are going to trust, either a new grad, a younger dentist specifically to come in and they're going to throw 40 grand at you to do a full mouth rehab. I just don't see that happening, but maybe I'm wrong.
And the other thing about full mouth rehabs, I mean, so many institutes make a whole career out of this. I mean, the Pankey Institute, the Coy Center, the Scottsdale Center, they're just talking about all these full mouth rehab cases. But when you look at the data, 211,000 people are alive in the United States with a dental degree, and 96% of all the crowns done at a lab are one tooth at a time. 96 out of 100. So the full mouth gets all the noise, but I can show you again 1,000 dentists who last year collected $1 million, took home $350 that didn't do one full mouth rehab case. I mean, you go to a room and lecture right now. It's July 2nd. Go to the room and say, okay, it's July 2nd. Raise your hand if you have not done an upper 10 set of veneers. Well, almost all the hands go up, and it's been half a year. And then say, raise your hand if you've done a full mouth reconstruction this year, and 2 hands go up. So I think the full mouth, the veneers, it gets all the noise, it gets all the attention, and it's basically a rounding error.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So perfect a single unit crown, and plus America, with 330 million people, what percent of Americans could never afford 8 upper veneers anyway? And most of the, I shouldn't say this, it might sound offensive, but it is Dentistry Uncensored. Most of the real parents, if you presented them, hey, Dad, do you want 8 veneers or orthodontics on your daughter? The dad would say, well, forget I'd pull my front tooth and wear a flipper to pay for orthodontics on my daughter. I mean, they pay down towards the kids. They don't, like telling a grandpa, every time my grandpa comes in, I tell him, we could get rid of these partials, we could do implants and bridges and full mouth. I mean, he just looked at me and goes, Dad, I'll probably be dead before I even see you for my next cleaning. Why the hell would I do that? I'm 73 years old. I mean, I can't believe I'm still alive this morning. I mean.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think, if you look at the demographic changes too, with the aging population, baby boom, I think the way that implants have come along and that technology, if you're my age, it seems like it would make sense to, invest in some of that CE. You're going to get the return on investment replacing those teeth.
I do want to say one thing about ortho, though, just to make sure I offend everybody in the short-term ortho market, which is really that whole genre space was pioneered by a guy named Ryan Swain. But there's only one board-certified orthodontist who teaches general dentists in America, and that's Richard Litt. He used to run the program at University of California, San Francisco, where he was the instructor for the orthodontic program. Then he moved out to Detroit, and he did University of Detroit. I was lucky enough, he put up an online CE course on Dentaltown. But, you need to learn ortho like the 10,000 orthodontists learned it. And there's only one of those guys who will teach a low-life general dentist everything they know about orthodontics. That's Richard Litt. And some of these people that are doing just jump into a weekend Invisalign course and start doing Invisalign, they only know what they know. They don't know what they don't know. And I would learn from the best instructor, and I think that's got to be Richard Litt.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think as far as ortho goes, you're looking at more than a weekend course probably to be able to do it correctly. I think, there's some things you can probably do to do some minor cosmetic corrections for patients that they would find acceptable, but Short-term ortho, I don't know, makes me a little nervous, I guess.
Well, it should make you nervous, and go talk to any orthodontist. Say, have you ever seen some kid get into something and they had a long face and a high angle and they start doing short term ortho and then, you can get into big trouble fast. So I would with ortho, it's all in the diagnosing and treatment planning, and you really have you seen that online CE course by Richard Litt?
I haven't. I've taken some of the Dentaltown online CE, but I have not taken that one specifically. But I did listen to the podcast that you did with him.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So have you, when you meet any other dentists and they do the podcast, do you ever meet any old guys like me that say, I listen to this show, or is it mostly just kids your age?
No, it's pretty much all people my age.
Yeah.
We just went to a golf outing on Tuesday. It's put on by some oral surgeons. We all went golfing together and met another guy, posts on Dentaltown all the time, works just right down the road from us, actually. So.
Yeah, I about every 4 months, someone will send me an email and say, hey, you got one old guy. But all the other ones are just like this. I graduated 2 years ago. So talk about your buy-in. Did you get how's that going? Did you get an attorney that focuses on this? Is the legal stressing you out? How's that process going?
Yeah, so we're kind of just at the beginning stages of it. But yeah, as far as like contract negotiation, things like that, definitely get a professional involved. It's nothing you want, if your brother's an attorney or something like that, you want somebody that actually has done like a partnership buy-in before. Don't just hire like the attorney or the accountant down the street, that kind of deal. With the DSO where I first originally started, they basically told me, hey, look, this is the contract. We want all 108 or 110 or whatever general dentists on the same contract, so we don't negotiate at all. So it's something like that. You can have them take a look at it, but it's kind of a take it or leave it type of a deal. But with private practice, definitely seems like a little bit more negotiating power there. So definitely worth having somebody take a look at it that has done dental specifically and knows what they're doing. So
what's the goal? Are you buying the practice or buying in as a partner?
Buying in as a partner. So there was 2 dentists. It was a partnership, and the one dentist sold to the other one. So now the one owns 100%, and then the thought is that I'll buy the 50% from him.
And can you share the broker you're using? I mean, is he a townie or?
I haven't used any of the townies. They're more Minnesota region specific. But you certainly could use like Jason Patrick Wood or Tim Lott or somebody like that.
Who's my buddy in Minnesota, the practice management expert? Drawing a blank. Have you?
Bill Rossi.
Oh, Bill Rossi. Edit that out, Ryan, of me asking what Bill Rossi's name is. He's only been my friend for 30 years. I think I'm either pre-stroke or past-stroke. I can't figure it out yet. But have you met him?
That's actually an interesting thing that you'd bring it up. But when I went to interview for this position that I have now, just looking at different offices, it's amazing what's out there and who's looking for associateships and things like that. And you walk into these offices and they're, old, they're run down. You talk to the dentist and it sounds like, he's doing like $500,000 a year or something like that. And it's like, you don't have enough room for an associate. I'll come here and I'll just starve is basically what I'm getting out of it. The practice that I walked into, though, they use Bill Rossi as a consultant. They are getting Google reviews. They have YouTube videos. They have a website. It's just like these guys have their stuff together. And I think that's part of the big success that I've had making that transition where, when you've been in an office like I was for 2.5 years, you build that patient base, you gain that trust, you're doing a lot of dentistry, and then to start over, it's hard to start over. Patients don't know you. You're kind of starting from square one. But these guys just, they have their stuff together. All their ducks are in a row. They're kind of constantly improving on the business. And it makes it so much easier to be an associate to go work for them. When you are busy, you are making money. April 1st of this year, I actually paid off my student loan, so I'm student loan free now.
2 years out of school?
Yeah, like 2.5 years.
Oh my God, most kids would have to sell a kidney to do that.
Right. I thought about it. I don't think it's legal though, but
Oh my gosh. So if you're listening to the show, what did he just say? What have I been saying for 450 shows? That when I see someone buy a $30,000 toy or a $50,000 toy or $80,000 toy, then I think if they would have been a dentist in Minnesota and gave that money to Bill Rossi, the return on investment would have been guaranteed. Probably would have been a double return, triple return. And I just can't get dentists to get dental consultants. They always want to buy a shiny object.
yeah, and I don't want to turn it into a commercial for Bill Rossi either,
No,
but
let's do it. He
it,
deserves it, man. That guy's.
if you look at the office's numbers before having the consultant, and now with the consultant on board, it's growing gangbusters. It's probably almost doubled in revenue.
I
Um,
know.
in I'd say I want to say 6 or 7 years maybe that they've used them, something like that. 2010, I want to say.
And
So
the other thing it does is peace of mind because let's say you come to a fork in the road and you go right, but for 5 years you're wondering if you should have gone left, and then you talk to a consultant and he can tell you, yeah, you're on the right path. Quit living in fear and keep going down. And I mean, it's just amazing. And there's also what I love about Bill Rossi. There's national legends out there like Sandy Pardue that can help a practice from Alaska to Manhattan, and it wouldn't matter if you were in Alaska or Manhattan, she could help you. But I love those local ones who just completely say, I'm just doing Minnesota. And they know Minnesota. They know every PPO plan. They know all the details. They know the labor market. They know the labor laws. I mean, Bill Rossi's been in that market for 30, 40 years, seen 1,000 practices. And I mean, a guy like that for a dentist in Minnesota can just give you laser focus to success. And then I'll say, no, I don't need that. I got an A in biochemistry. I'm actually the smartest guy in the class. I'm going to fly to the Dominican Republic and learn how to do bone grafting. And it's like, okay, dude.
yeah, exactly. And I think for us it gives the older dentist something to kind of focus on, kind of projects to always be improving on, and so I think it's more than just his ideas or what different things that he has for us to do. It's more of there's a little bit more accountability then, so it's not just like a weekend CE course that you go to and they say audit your fees and submit these 15 to Delta to get higher reimbursement or something. There's actually somebody following up like, okay, we talked about auditing or petitioning or whatever. Where are we at there? Did you do it? And if you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? Or so there's the having the accountability aspect, especially for me as the associate where I don't own yet. It's kind of nice because I feel like it's keeping us more on track too. So,
But here's the craziest thing in dentistry. If a guy's selling this bottle of water, sell it to me at 7-Eleven for 89 cents, and I said, well, how much did it cost you to make this? He would tell me. And okay, well, I just bought it at 89 cents. How'd that work? And they go, well, blah, blah, blah. They do the whole breakdown. I go into every dental office in America. Dentist walks out. Just did an MOD composite. I said, how much did that cost, and what did you net on it? Nobody can answer. And when they say cost, they'll say, oh, I think $250. And I'll say, you signed up for a PPO, dude. You just did that one for $145. You don't even know your cost. You just spent an hour in that room, and you just shredded two $20 bills. And then they'll want to go to a course to argue about the pros and cons of the bonding agent between 3M and Ivoclar when these two companies have probably more. You couldn't even memorize all the names of all the PhDs who worked on that bonding agent for 5 years, and you want to go listen to some guy rattle about that, and you can't even tell me the cost of what you just did and sold.
yeah, and I think that's true across America. I don't know if there's a good way to track that or not, but if you came to our office now and you wanted to know what it cost me to do an MO composite, I don't know.
Well, Bill Rossi would know.
Yeah,
Bill knows. So
yeah,
Bill would be showing you where the fire was. Bill would, and the other thing Bill would be telling you, everybody treats people differently. So you might just your favorite person in the whole office might be your front office receptionist. One of them, Valerie, or whatever. But he can come in there and say, I know you love her, dude, but that's the weakest link up here. We need to work on this, and she needs to change, or we need to let it go. Or he'd see that the PPOs that you're on and he's got a macro red flag of which offices signed up for which PPOs and started losing money, and which ones made money, or he just maybe just glance say, okay, well, when Steve does an MO, how much time is he blocking off? I mean, is he blocking off 30 minutes or an hour or 45? And so there's just so many things they're watching that he might not be sharing all that specifically with you. But I just can't say enough about Bill. Plus, he's bald. When's the last time you met a bald guy in dentistry that wasn't just top notch?
It's never happened. It's you and Bill, and you're both top notch. So there you go.
Right on. Okay. So a lot of questions we get. They're working for Aspen. They're working for American Dental Partners. They're working for corporate, and they got their eye. They see you, and you jump ship. You're 2 years out of school. You're buying in and all this stuff, and they're just afraid. And it's smart to be afraid. It's smart to be literate enough to know that there are dangers and risks, but they just don't know how long they should keep getting experience before they go jump ship and talk to a practice broker and buy the practice of their dreams. What do you think is things they should be thinking about if they're working at Aspen of when they're ready to jump?
I think if you look at yourself in the mirror, like kind of what happened with me is, a year went by, and every year or every week that went by, I learned something new. I learned how to get faster. I learned how to do it better. Smoother crown preps, whatever the case might be. But after about a year, maybe year and a half, like I said, it was like the same week after week. I wasn't learning anything anymore. I wasn't growing. I was limited in the number of procedures I could do, and it was just I need to spread my wings, and I need to keep growing, because if I don't, I was worried that just like you were talking earlier about the people that don't like doing root canals, don't like taking out teeth, so they won't do it. Well, you let years and years go by, and it's going to be harder and harder for you to get back on that horse. And I think same thing with a DSO. If you keep working, keep doing the same thing, and you aren't growing anymore, and you don't, you might never jump if you let it go too long.
Man, I love that. That was perfect. As long as you're growing, you're good, and when you stop growing, you need to change the scene.
Exactly.
That's profound.
Always grow further, or always aim to be better. And as soon as that seems like it's just week after week, I got a paycheck, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing a crown here, a filling here, but I'm not. My crown isn't any better. My fillings aren't any better. I didn't do anything or learn anything. I think it's time to move on.
That's great advice. Ryan, right next to me, just said, "That's excellent advice. I'm going to get a new dad today." And so he's going to jump ship. You're back to the AGD. Have you met any dentists in the AGD where that's a value-added relationship that if you wouldn't have joined the AGD, you wouldn't have met Henry or Alice or whatever? Have you found Eagle friends by joining the AGD?
Yep, absolutely. There's probably there's one. It's the first weekend in April. And then there's one again, it's the first weekend in October every year. And I go to those two. They're 2-day courses. It rotates through the 16 or 17 or 18 different categories that you need for a mastership in the AGD. And so you get kind of a broad spectrum. But there's definitely that following where these guys are working towards their mastership, and they, easily they're 10 or 15 years older than I am. So they have 10 or 15 more years of experience, and like I said, they're all smarter than me. You think you know it all coming out of dental school. What I think in dental school I did 30 crowns maybe. Well, now I do one a day at work probably, so I've probably done a couple hundred. Well, these guys have probably done a couple thousand. So even stuff like single unit crown and bridge, or a class 2 composite or something, they still have something to add to it, all those years of experience. So you surround yourself by smarter people, and you're going to get smarter. If you're the smartest one in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. So,
and the Harvard Business Review always has, for decades, has done that test. So they go to the CEOs and the top 10% performing at the bottom and say, what trait do the top 10% CEOs have at the bottom? And they always come back with humility. And what you just said was humble. And when you ask Americans to describe a dentist, physician, or lawyer, they never say humble. They say arrogant, asshole, didn't listen to the thing I said. I only saw him 2 seconds. And it's if the young mind is humble and intellectually curious, they just go right to the top. And I think that you're a summation of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and that's what I think was best about AGD. The people you met. Same thing with the study club. I mean, the study club's only once a month, and maybe the speaker's boring, but your town of Parsons has 50 dentists, and only 10 of them are going to this deal. Well, guess which 10 those are? Those are the most intellectually curious. Those are the ones most going for it, and you just need to, you're talking monkeys. You need to spend the most time talking to those monkeys. And if you hang out with those talking monkeys who are humble and intellectually curious and are trying to be better, you'll just be better,
Yep, absolutely.
So what other advice? Oh my God, the hour is up. God, that was a fast hour. I think that might have been the fastest hour ever. I just looked at it, checked the time, and it's already 1 hour and 1 minute. So what? Give a close to the dental students. If you could just talk to the seniors in dental school, what would you tell them?
I would say get out of dental school. Just try to get your fingers wet. I wouldn't worry about building a practice, starting up a practice, anything like that. I just try to get better and faster at what you do. I try to learn something new every day or every week at least. I try to network, find people who are smarter than you, whether it's the study club. In Minnesota, it's the AGD by far. Some of the smartest dentists I've ever met are in the AGD. I'd work on paying back some student loans. So my first student loan payment, I actually looked it up to try to bring it up here, but I think it was like $1,800 was my first loan payment, and about 60% of that was interest that I had accrued in 1 month. So I was, of that $1,800, I think it was about $700 in principal. So you can imagine how long it takes to pay down 6 figures in student loans. So, you're coming out of dental school. You're not used to living the high life. I have a car that's 12 years old, paid for. I don't have a car payment. We go out to nice restaurants, dinners, things like that, but don't go crazy. You don't need courtside season tickets. You don't need a BMW. You're used to living at a lower standard of living, and I'm not saying live like you're a poor dental student, but don't go crazy and focus on that student loan debt, because that'll absolutely just crush you. And now that I'm out from under that, I got about a $4,000 a month raise by not having that payment anymore. So that's great, and just try to do good every day. Get involved with Dentaltown.
And what has Dentaltown done for you? When did you join Dentaltown? Were you back in? You joined you joined 6 years ago, 2010.
Yeah, so I joined. At the University of Minnesota, they had a Loops fair where the Loop vendors come in. You can demo different things or whatever. And so they had a flyer for it, and I think it was Designs for Vision had won the Townie Choice Award in 2009 or 2010. And I was wondering what Townie Choice was. So I just Googled Townie Choice, stumbled onto Dentaltown, signed up. And I think I have close to 1,000 postings now. I take some CE there. I've listened to probably 200 of your 460 podcasts, and it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing what's out there that's free. The informed consent from our office for oral surgery and endo is today's dental, basically. The consent forms that you posted on Dentaltown, just slightly reworded, obviously rebranded with our stuff, kind of combined the consent forms from there, from previous jobs and from the University of Minnesota to kind of make it our own. But I mean, it's amazing what's out there, and it's free.
Have you met any friends on Dentaltown?
So I have some people that I follow and some people that I talk to pretty regularly from Dentaltown. I've never met them in person. I couldn't pick them out of a lineup. But also, most of my best friends from dental school, we're all townies. We'll talk about stuff that we saw in Dentaltown. Every time we get together, we're going to have a beer, and I'll say, hey, did you see that thread or that post on this? And it's one of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning is I look at Dentaltown. One of the last things I do before I go to bed every night, I look at Dentaltown. So
that is so cool. I love my homies so much. I mean, dentists are trying to put themselves out of business by fluoridating water, fluoridating toothpaste, telling everybody how to brush and floss. They're always there to help all their competitors. I mean, the oral surgeon in my zip code will help any dentist in the whole deal learn how to pull teeth, wisdom teeth. They're just one of the greatest group of guys. There was a kid up the street from here that got arrested selling drugs and everything, and he's going to look at some jail time and everything. And the boys were all shocked. And I was telling the boys last night, I said, the worst thing about what he was doing was that when you're in that type of an industry, everybody you're hanging out with is a turkey. And then I said, but when you go into something like dentistry, and I just started going through all my friends, I said, well, what do you think? What do you think of him? They're just like, just the all-American guy. Well, what do you think of him? Oh, the all-American guy. And I just said, when you're in dentistry, you're just hanging out with such an elite crowd of just amazing people. And that poor dumbass selling drugs, everybody that he was buying and selling with, and the illegal side of it would probably stab you in the back and, you know, bad element. I just love dentistry. I love the way they share. I love the way dentistry is more of a vocation. It's not an occupation.
I'd agree completely.
Yeah. Well, hey, buddy, thank you so much for spending an hour with me on a Saturday morning. Tell you should have been taking your sweet, lovely wife to the IHOP or the Waffle House or to the park, and instead you spent it with me, and I really appreciate that.
Howard, it's great. Thank you for everything you've done for dentistry.
And tell Bill Rossi that his ears ought to be burning, and do not tell him that I drew a blank on his name for at least 30 seconds.
All right, well, edit that part out because he knows I'm doing this podcast. So
okay, you can tell him I forgot his name. He knows he's the same age I am, so he's probably early dementia too. So
yeah, he probably doesn't even know who I am. So
all right, buddy, have a rockin' hot day.
All right, thanks, Howard.